All right. I'm being somewhat vague with this title because I just don't feel like naming it. But I think we can agree on one thing. The one thing we can agree on is this is that the low intensity sort of civil war slash culture war continues on day in and day out. What in the world do I mean by this? Well, we saw the mall shooting recently. Well, mall shootings, multiple shootings in that particular mall. Um, but one of those was stopped by a good guy with a gun. And of course, now, arms are thrown up, this and that, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. But the low intensity civil war continues on. We see it with the Black Hammer stuff that occurred down in Atlanta. I don't, like I say, look these up yourselves, but that continues on. And of course, because it's an election year, a lot of this gets stirred up. I did it when it wasn't cool, though. When it wasn't an election year. When it was not. Oh, wait a minute. Well, last summer, 2020. Well, actually, now 2021. Yeah, so it wasn't cool. Yeah, for me to be promoting that Civil War stuff, I did it when it wasn't cool. But yeah, anyway. Um, it's just AstroTurf. A lot of it is. Um, you cannot say to a certain point that the riots that occurred over the summer of 2020 weren't completely astroturfed in some way. Um, we saw the U.S. military back down. We saw them give hugs to folks. And we saw them doing the Macarena with, protesters to calm them down. It was only like Department of Corrections and something else that were actually the ones that defended the White House. The military didn't, which speaks to a larger issue, of course, of how astroturf the military is and how much the United States military is in the pocket of mud deep state or whatever you want to say. But we all know that these things will continue. These sorts of skirmishes will continue on. Ban all the guns you want to. Once you start coming into people's houses, you're going to have masses of people who are going to be like, I'm going out in a blaze. And you're going to get that. So while I don't believe you're going to have like some sort of 10-year insurgency or whatever, listening to Bo the Fifth Column talk about Moran Corporation, and apparently he's just like, oh, it's so ridiculous to me how this guy will talk shit about capitalism, but then will just bend over for all these federal institutions. But I've said that before. My point is this: is it will continue on. I don't think that's a stretch of the imagination at all. It will continue. It will continue, and it's not going to be pretty. And because of that, just like it was before, where there are just certain places where, for the most part, you just didn't go. There are parts of Chicago you just don't go. There are parts of Detroit you just don't go. And of course, you could, we can go on and on talking about race and whatnot. We're not going to do that. We're going to leave that up to the audience member to figure out. But what I will say is that it will become more and more like that. And the federal government will just ignore these places. Other places deemed more important will be held down. And they will make sure that they stay safe for whatever reason, certain areas will be ignored, forgotten. Other places will be considered like a festoon, and they will be defended to the last for whatever reason. Maybe a president likes to be there or they grew up there or something like that. I imagine to a point that's how it works. But anyway, maybe I'm getting real schizo. My point is this, is that the low intensity stuff that we see will continue. The LARPing will continue. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm going to try to remain consistent on this until until U.S. dissidents of whatever stripe reach out to Russia and China, although the United States military already has better connections, well, with China. I can't speak for Russia, but definitely with China. But until they reach out to a country that has good infrastructure and is able to produce millions and millions of rounds of ammunition and produce tanks, vehicles, etc., etc. Now, mind you, the United States, I think, does have people who can adapt and can create stuff on the fly that will be just temporary, sure. But we're talking serious technology. Then there's no point in continuing on with that. Now, do you have to be best friends with the Chinese, best friends with the Russians? Hell no. Especially the Chinese. Chinese will sell you out in a heartbeat. Russians may sell you out, but like I say, it's a difficult thing. I'm not going to get into that. What I will say, though, is you don't have to trust them. You just take their weapons and use them against them, Now, of course, like I say, perfect example of this would be the Vietnam War. Without the Chinese, in particular, after the Sino-Soviet split and all that other shit, without the Chinese giving support to Vietnam during the Vietnam War, Vietnam probably wouldn't be as it is today. But what happened right after? Well, you had Deng Xiaoping come in and everything else like that, but you saw for some ancient rivalries come up, as you do. The blood libels come up, and the Chinese are like, Vietnam, we appreciate, it's like, hey man, you bought all these weapons from us and everything, but you know what? Vietnam, fuck you. And so, we had the Sino-Vietnamese War, 1979. Of course, that didn't go splendidly well. I've seen some Chinese nationalist types who cope about it, but it didn't go that well. It genuinely didn't go that well. And I mentioned China some more because we see that China has bought more U.S. homes, or more specifically, Chinese millionaires and billionaires think that they can avoid the CCP, or they can avoid the communist, or the Chinese Communist Party, whichever you want to say, or the CPC, whatever way you want to put it. But anyway, maybe I'm shifting my views by using CCP instead of CPC, but who gives a fuck? The point is this, the Chinese billionaires think that they're going to buy up, territory and buy up homes, and thinking that they're going to be saved because of that. Oh, well, they're not going to take my money now. And they've been taught to a point that the only way you can really invest is to invest in some apartment, on, a floor, on like the 25th floor of a building, and thinking that that's going to be, A-okay. As far as that, like I say, I'm sure that other investments do exist in China, but I think that generally speaking, at least what I'm taught, maybe by propaganda, but it's housing. And of course, that's, housing, of course, famously is recession proof. No, I'm joking. We know that it's not. But anyway, let's try to wrap this burrito up here. So, and of course, we see the Chinese think that, they're going to be safe and everything else like that. But we see, though, tanks outside of banks in China. This is kind of something that I noticed when I was on Twitter. I was like, oh shit. And apparently it's because they don't want people taking out money. So, like I say, China's going through its issues as well. Not to the same degree or to the same whatever as the United States, but the thing is, though, is that overall, this is not post-Qing dynasty China where you have various warlords, this and that. There may be a possibility of that. I'm not going to say no, but I think that it's a very far out type of thing. I think the CCP or CPC, whichever you want to say, has really clamped things down. It has, created at least a sort of the party's good enough and it meets my basic needs, so who cares? I think that's what they've created. Of course, the authoritarianism, yada yada yada, but I don't want to fall into the anti-China vortex too hard, even though I kind of already have. But I'm being cautious. What I would say though is it's going to continue to get bad. It will. Like I say, right now we're just kind of there's the skirmishes and all this sort of thing, but it will continue to get worse. And until you reach out to outside parties to come help, you're not going to make it. Like I say, I think that's the part of the problem. It's the same type of thing. I mean, you'll see some of these communist groups are like, we're going to be completely independent. We're going to be independent groups. It's like, no, you're bullshitting. You're bullshitting me. It's like, no, you're not. You don't want to be independent. The Bolsheviks weren't independent. There's a reason why Trotsky went to New York. Of course, MLs love to cope about that and be like, well, he just didn't this, or, oh, come on. They had to get their money from somewhere. My Nazis are going to be, completely independent. No, they weren't. They took advantage of folks and then they, went back, the same type of thing. I mean, when they want to bring up, the elevator guy, I can't think of it. Well, we think of it as just elevators, but, took advantage of a lot of folks. But anyway, I've always said it before, but if you want to have a completely independent movement, then you've already failed. But I don't even like the term movement. My movement. The movement is gonna save us. I don't give a fuck about no damn movement. What can you get me right now? I don't give a fuck about whatever you're promoting, whatever long-term goals. Man, can you put food on the table? Okay, I'll give you lip service then. That's how a lot of people feel. And hell, I feel the same way. I'll give lip service to this system because it's meeting my basic needs. But when they don't, I'll join who does. That's opportunism, that's whatever. But you know what? That's the truth. At this point, ideology means very little to me. I can read about it and be like, oh, that's interesting. But at the end of the day, I'm not tied to an ideology. And I think that most ordinary people aren't. Because they don't have they don't taste the fruits of that labor. They aren't like Pete Buttigieg, who can be an incompetent fool and destroy the city in Indiana, completely whiz it down his leg, and then become Department of Transportation, where he's like, yeah, we actually need more electric cars and shit like that. It's just like, he wants this system to keep going because that's how he survived. South Bend, I think, is where he was. But anyway, it will keep going. The attacks will continue. The LARP of something similar to Chaz, the attacks on businesses will continue. Both, nationwide chains like Target or your small mom and pop stores, the few that are left. It'll continue. Some of it will be astroturfed. Some of it won't. Does it really matter ultimately what's astroturfed and what isn't? People will, decide later on, gather the information. But if your store is gone, your store is gone, Anyway, I think that's all I have. Like I say, I'm sober, but I realize enough that the situation will continue to deteriorate. How bad it will deteriorate, that's a matter of opinion. Anyway, see you later. Goodbye.